This week on the podcast, we're diving into the financial dimension of wellness, which does not get nearly enough love. I'm Quinn.
And I'm Drew.
And this is The Year We Got Better.
Welcome back to the podcast. If you're new here, Quinn and I are on a 52-week journey to improve our holistic wellness, and we're taking you along with us.
This is episode 8, so it's going pretty well so far.
So far, so good. We can't really complain.
Yeah, I mean, we're about 2 months in, which is actually kind of crazy.
It's wild to think about it in like that whole kind of perspective, but
no, it totally is. Well, this week we are really excited to dive into the financial dimension of wellness.
Excited and nervous.
Yeah. Well, I think it's worth saying that we are not, financial experts, and I don't know, don't sue us if you take our financial advice.
Well, no, and honestly, I don't think this is intended to, it's not financial advice.
No.
And in fact, I think we're not qualified for that. And more so, we just want to have a discussion around more the psychology around finances and the way that financial decisions are made and how we've kind of approached our finances.
Totally. I think kind of the way that I wanted to kick off this discussion is I'm curious to know your thoughts, Drew, on why is it so hard to talk about finances? Why does that feel so awkward at times?
That is a great question. I think in many ways this has to do with the fact that finances, let me rephrase this, personal finances, I think can feel like a black box.
Totally. Thank you.
What I mean by that is it's not a topic that is often discussed with others in an open and transparent way. I think sometimes we like to project the best version of ourselves.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of shame or guilt or fear that can be wrapped up in money.
And I also think in terms of talking about it with other people, there might be this sense of competition
or inferiority, superiority. Yeah.
Right. There's the keeping up with the Joneses effect, but then there's also the worry of is it going to be awkward if I say I make, way more money than my friend?
Right.
Right. So I think there's a lot of, there's a lot of kind of fraughtness to this topic where it can feel weird.
Well, yeah. And you've talked about this before, but I think it can sometimes come across as not being tasteful to talk about money.
It's not classy.
Yeah.
I'm kind of F that, to be honest. And this is not my original take, but I think that this idea that it's rude or it's tasteless to talk about your finances feels to me like one of those things that comes from the man, right? If you are transparent and open about personal finance topics, I think a lot of opportunities open up. First of all, you might realize, someone in your same role is making more than you. Mm-hmm. You might then be empowered to advocate for yourself. You might also get the chance to learn from your friends or colleagues or peers or family, whatever,
Yeah.
So I think that this idea that you shouldn't talk about money really benefits the people in power and does not benefit you at all.
I think that's totally true.
Right. I think that another kind of reason that we might feel some shame or awkwardness talking about finances is the lack of education in this area. And I want to hear your thoughts on this, Drew, because I know this is something just you and I have talked about before.
No, we have. I mean, I think back to, honestly, the only personal financial education that I had in a formal capacity, I had this class called Living in a Contemporary World when I was a freshman in high school. It was the first year they'd ever run it.
Okay.
And basically all I remember from it is they taught us how to write a check. And I think they discussed a little bit of we did some faux buying stock exercises, but I'm I know what Nike is, so I'm going to buy Nike stock. That was
right.
There wasn't education around what it actually was or how it applied to your adult life. And unfortunately, I think for many people, at least this was my personal experience, going through life, the only exposure you have to personal finances is what you see your parents do.
Totally. And, not to shit on either of our parents. I think, both of our parents obviously doing their best, but I don't know that necessarily, well, I'll just say for myself, I don't know that my parents necessarily were looking at personal finance as something they wanted to actively teach me about. Mm-hmm. I remember I had my first job when I was in high school. I worked at McDonald's and I did my taxes, and my dad was kind of yeah, you just, Google the 1040 EZ. And I was okay, I guess I'll do that. Mm-hmm. And I did it. And, whatever, it was fine. It was easy. It was easy. Mm-hmm. But Aside from that, I don't think there was ever a ton of like concentrated personal finance education going on in my family.
Mm-hmm.
And again, no shade to my parents. I also don't know if that was something that was really being talked about as something you should do.
Yeah, and this is, I've talked about the psychology of money before, but this topic of parental education or parental observation
Yeah.
in personal finance is something that the author explores a lot. One of the interesting conclusions, I think, from this discussion with the author was that it really just, your scope and view of personal finance is so inherently shaped by those things that you observe,
Totally.
that even later in life, when you start to expose yourself to other ideas, it's very hard to break some of those habits, or to push outside of those bounds can feel uncomfortable.
So, in the sense that, you know, our parents are kind of our main source of financial education when we're younger,
Mm-hmm.
but then also considering that our parents aren't necessarily like super focused on that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you approach that now as an adult? Like, how do you go about educating yourself on financial matters?
Well, I think now more than ever, this is an important topic and discussion to have, just because when we were younger, access to the internet was much more limited.
Yeah.
Our range of information that we had access to was more controlled.
Right.
Now, I think as a young person, you have access to so many different voices telling you different things that are going to be like a way that you can get rich quick, or this is the path to retiring early, or like it almost feels in some ways like we've leveled the playing field in terms of importance of voice. And you can choose whoever you want to listen to.
But like maybe almost too much, right? Because then it's like, how do you actually know who is a reputable voice to listen to?
Exactly. This is, I ultimately think it results in putting a burden on the individual to be able to distinguish, like, who's the right person to listen to? Is this person, do they have the qualifications to make them worthy of me taking their advice? And is the advice that they're giving me the right for me? In many cases, we're not getting personalized advice when we're looking at, you know, I'm not going to call any names out, but when you listen to CNBC, or you listen to like these like stock pickers, or you listen to like financial gurus on Instagram, they're not giving personalized advice to Quinn.
No.
They're giving generalized advice, or in even a worst case scenario, they're giving a recounting of their personal experience.
Right. Which can be totally, you know, worlds different than your own.
Well, and it has to do with circumstances, right? Like this is another thing they talk about in the psychology of money, but like if you look at the outlier situations, that's actually like the worst thing to try and replicate. Because if you're like, this person became a multimillionaire or a billionaire, how did they do that? There's a combination of like lifestyle, luck, the actual tactics that they're employing. The ratio of those things is in flux for many people. So like you could put the same person in the same situation again, and the outcome might be different just because the timing was wrong, or like the cards just fell differently. It's dangerous to try and replicate one person's situation.
I think, Drew, you said a word that is so key here, and that is luck. I think that I'm like trying not to be too controversial here, but I think that there is a big narrative in America, the pull yourself up by your bootstraps narrative, right? Which basically says this country is a meritocracy, and if you work hard enough and you hustle and you get after it, you can make it big. And frankly, I think that is a myth. I think that yes, if you work hard and you hustle and you get after it, you will have better results, most likely, than if you are not doing that.
Yes.
However, the element of luck to take you from like comfortable middle class living to extremely wealthy, you know, Warren Buffett, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, luck does play a role. And just working hard and getting after it, like that's great, but that is not going to make you the next Elon Musk.
Well,
so don't fall for people who are telling you that it is.
And it doesn't mean you can't do anything to try and, to your point, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and put in effort. But you also need to recognize that not everything is within your control, and to plan for that not everything's going to be in your control.
And not just that not everything is in your control, but most things are not in your control.
Yes.
I think that this is going to be my tangent of the day, I feel. I think that this idea that not everything is in your control and that most things are outside of your control is kind of a tenet of adulthood. And that, I don't know, successfully adulting kind of depends on accepting that and making the most of that and saying, I'm going to devote my time and energy to controlling the things I can.
Yeah.
You know?
I like that a lot. I think it puts the power, lets you take the power back a little
Yes.
bit.
Even in a world where, like, yeah, most things are kind of out of your control. But I want to pivot back to what we're
Hmm.
supposed to be talking about, which is finances and
Yeah.
personal finances. And we've kind of talked a lot about why, it's difficult to talk about money, why it can be confusing,
Hmm.
and also why, transparency in your personal finance conversations can open up a lot of doors.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, I want to kind of open it up for you, Drew, to talk a little bit about, like, your personal finance journey. And I'm going to talk about mine after, but I want to hear
Yeah.
yours first.
So, I mean, my first, as I said, exposure to personal finance, like, was just through observing my parents. I got my first job when I was 15, working at a swim club and a concession stand and the front gate operations.
Honestly, so iconic. I wish I knew you then. I probably would have had a crush on you.
So it was a fun time. That was the first time I started earning my own income. I didn't have an allowance when I was growing up, so this was like, my parents bought me the things that I needed or wanted up until that point. I opened a savings and checking account, and then just kind of like started putting some stuff in my savings account. And then when I wanted to buy something big, I'd go buy it. There wasn't really like a longer term vision. The first time I really saved for something big, I remember, was buying a computer for college. I like knew that I wanted to get a MacBook. This was just like, if Macs were like a newer thing, and I was like, I really, really want to have this. So put all my Cold Stone money, just like, I kept some obviously for fun, but I started putting some money away into my savings account, and eventually was able to buy myself the computer before I went to college. I was very lucky in that, in combination of a scholarship that I received and then also my parents' financial support, I didn't really have a burden of paying for college.
Like student loans.
I didn't have student loans, which I recognize is like an incredible financial benefit that many people are not able to experience. So like, I don't take that for granted at all. That is like a huge benefit and advantage that I've had in my financial situation.
And a huge gift, like, from your parents and also from, your ability that had earned you a scholarship.
Yeah. So, getting out of college, I was already set up to move a little bit faster than I think some other people might have been able to. After I graduated college, I moved back home with my parents for several years. And because of that, I wasn't really paying rent. So during this time, I had started just putting more of my earnings into a savings account because I didn't really like have that much to spend it on.
Yeah.
I've always kind of had the mindset of being a saver. So
you definitely do.
The first kind of like exposure to financial education, like for personal finance, I would say that I had that was formal. It's very random that this happened, but early in my second job, the CFO of our company had like a personal like interest in hosting a personal finance workshop.
Oh, that's so cool.
So she started playing videos for us during lunch for anyone who wanted to attend.
That's cool.
To just watch these videos of who I didn't know it at the time, but was Dave Ramsey.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And this was like almost 10 years ago at this point.
Okay.
So I would watch them and I'd be like, this is really interesting. I've never heard of this perspective before. Some of these concepts apply to me, some of them don't. And that was the first time that I like was exposed to more formal budgeting and started thinking about like, what's the percentage that I'm saving and how am I allocating money for different types of activities in my life.
Right.
And from there, saving became like a much more fixed like thing that I could put my eyes on the target and say like, I want to start moving in this direction.
Like clear goals.
Exactly. That like really positioned me, I think, for success as I like grew older. I think there are still, as I'm getting more toward present now, there's still things that like I know that I want to do better at in my financial journey. Like I invest in like my retirement through work. My like personal investments are something that I haven't put enough effort into. Like I can acknowledge that.
Yeah.
But one of the main reasons for that is like I feel like because I have a lack of knowledge in the topic, I feel very afraid sometimes about knowing what the right next step is.
And I think there's an element, and I don't want to speak for you, Drew, but I think there's an element of kind of like decision paralysis there, right? Where it feels like, I don't know what to do, so I'm going to do nothing.
Yeah.
But then ultimately doing nothing
you're making a choice.
Right. Exactly. Like even if you didn't get a great return, getting some little return is better than, nothing. But I totally understand that because I feel the same way.
It's hard. I feel like you have mixed messages coming at you constantly. You're
Absolutely.
like, you need to invest, you need to take advantage of compounding interest, you need to do this early.
Right.
And then you have 7 different people telling you different ways to do this. Also, should I get a financial advisor? Should I do this on my own? Should I use like a robo investor? Should I use an AI investor? Should I be investing in crypto? Like there's just so many like
even simpler things like which brokerage should I use to open an account, you know, and stuff like that. Totally. I get so overwhelmed in the research of it that I'm like, okay, I've done 10 hours of research and now I'm so tired that I'm going to do nothing still.
Yeah. And some of this comes down to, I think it's really hard for me personally with money to feel like I'm to get past the fear of having lost something. I think in some ways this might come from like my upbringing, but the mindset of like you worked hard for what you made.
Yeah.
Like it is in your best interest to try and protect this and make sure that like you don't want to squander like all the hours that you worked for the money that you earned.
Yeah.
So making the fear of making the wrong decision is something that I think has kind of like plagued me throughout my financial journey and is something that I have to actively work against when you're trying to like, I mean, there's an element of risk in everything. That's the other thing that I think is important to understand in finances. So understanding what your personal level of risk tolerance is something that I still struggle with it.
It's a tough one. And I think it all kind of comes back. I like to say this every episode, but I think it all kind of comes back to it's a personal thing, right? Like you had said, Drew, there's so many, you know, financial voices on the internet, whether that is someone who is an actual financial advisor or like the latest person who decides they're going to be a financial guru on Instagram.
Yeah.
But no matter what, with these people you see online, it's not personalized to you. So you, I think, have to be able to take that advice with a grain of salt almost and really use a discerning eye to say, does this apply to my situation? Does this align with my goals? Right? There's a few questions you have to ask to kind of follow up on that kind of advice.
Yes. Can you tell me a little bit more about your personal journey?
Sure, I can. But I think you skipped over something really important, Drew, in your financial journey, which is that through your saving and efforts, you were able to make a very big purchase about 2 years ago.
Yep. I was able to buy a house. Well, buy a house, meaning put a down payment on a house and then just have debt that's financed through a bank that I like continue to pay every month.
Yes.
But, you know, I do think that was something that was like a big goal that I was working toward. And it's something that I was like happy to be able to achieve. Like it was, you know, I have realized through the process of doing that this like home purchasing process is another thing.
Oh my gosh, I know.
There's not enough education about.
No, I just think back to like these classes I took in high school and even college, like some kind of general ed requirements that I'm like, wow, I'm so glad that I took that intro to geology class. That really benefited my life. I needed an intro to paying my taxes and buying a home.
It's hard. It's hard.
So
There's so many,
hard.
and I don't know. You talk about how hard it is to be an adult sometimes, or a lot.
That's like my favorite topic.
I think this is the perfect example of that, where I found myself constantly asking, am I supposed to know what, like, does everyone else know what you're supposed to be doing right now? And I just am like in the minority here. Like, I don't want to sound like an idiot to the broker that I'm talking to, or like the, you know, whoever in this process. I want to sound informed, but I don't know what I'm talking about half the time.
I honestly, genuinely believe that everyone is fucking faking it. I really do. Like, nobody knows. Nobody knows this stuff. You know, once you've done it, right? Like now, Drew, you've gone through the process of buying a house, so you're like more familiar with that.
Well, I know more than I did when we started the process. I don't know everything.
No, obviously not. But I'm just saying that like no one does. And I think it's so common to feel like, am I supposed to know this? Does that, like, it feels like everyone else is in on this secret, but I don't think anyone is. I think we're all pretending to have it together.
Yeah.
And I think that's, again, part of the importance of transparent conversations around these like issues, because if you realize that you're not alone in that shame can go away. And I think it can open you up more to actively seeking out learning.
Well, and I think a perfect example of this is like when we were going through the process of buying the house. You know, I really didn't know anything.
Right.
And
likewise,
I was lucky to have like 2 people in my corner who I could turn to just ask like sounding board questions.
Yeah, who had kind of had like a interest in real estate and had done this a few
like
times.
My brother-in-law had like bought a few different properties, and then the lending agent who I was working with, I don't know if that was his exact title, But the two of them together were like great throughout the process to
Great
just be
resources.
like, what am I supposed to do next? How did this work for you? Having someone who's actually gone through the process to just like bend their ear, really, just there's a huge benefit there.
I also think it's worth saying that like not everybody has that,
Yeah.
right? So it's, you know, if you're maybe the first generation in your family to purchase property, or also, you know, same thing with college and taking out student loans. If you're the first generation in your family to go to college, you don't necessarily have those resources just provided to you, right? So that is where it can get a little tricky too, and it can feel very isolating, I think.
Yeah.
Well, let me get back on track.
Yeah. So tell me about your journey.
Okay, so my financial journey, I think, you know, I think our financial upbringings really start off in childhood, and like we've talked about what you see from your parents. And I was lucky to grow up in a very kind of like privileged household. We didn't really want for much, and like Drew, I also did not have student loans. That said, I think my parents were very focused on making sure that we like understood the value of money in whatever way that they could kind of achieve that, while also living in a very wealthy kind of bubble. So with that in mind, we did earn allowance in our house. And if we wanted, you know, things besides the basic necessities, we were like expected to pay for those things ourselves. I got my first job when I was 16, I think 16. At McDonald's. Like I said, honestly, it was awesome. I made like some great friends there. I worked the after school shift. It was like a bunch of teenagers. It was really fun. And through that, I saved up money to buy my first car, which was a, you know, extremely secondhand, maybe like 40th hand Jeep Cherokee that I loved with all my heart. It was such a cool car. They're like coming back in vogue now. I feel like they would be made way more expensive these days. But anyway, so I think I had some basic experience with saving. I also opened a savings and checking account at like a local bank when I was very young. My dad thought that was really important. And I remember I had like a dinosaur piggy bank, and I would save all my coins that I would get from stuff. And I would like shove dollar bills in there too. But I remember I took it to the bank. Like I literally brought the piggy bank into the bank. They counted all my coins in the coin counter machine. It was very fun. And I had like $99. So that was my first ever bank deposit. And I still have that bank account today. But yeah, so I think that was kind of the beginning of my financial journey. So I think I had some experience, you know, saving and working towards some financial goals. But I also think I was not exposed in a meaningful way to what it would look like to live as an adult with a significantly lower salary than what my parents are making. So, you know, go through college, whatever. My parents are paying for college and my living expenses. So I kind of, I worked in college as well. I had a job at Baskin Robbins for my like spending money, but my parents paid for like living at college and attending college.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I accepted an extremely low paying and very difficult job. And that was kind of, I think, my first taste of like struggling, like not having enough money to like meet my obligations. And, you know, long story short, like weird roommate situation where I kind of ended up stuck with like more rent than I had anticipated to pay. I was like truly living paycheck to paycheck, taking on credit card debt, and also like door dashing in like the evenings after my job because I literally couldn't afford to park my car and pay for it until the meters turned off at 8 p.m. So that was definitely, I think, my first exposure to being like, wow, I'm really strapped for cash. And like, if anything goes wrong, I'm totally fucked. So I quit that job after 2 years and kind of moved on to a different job where I was pretty much still not making a lot of money, but a little more. And so I was able to save a little bit, but definitely I think my early 20s were kind of rocky in terms of my financial landscape. And during that time, I took on student debt for a master's degree that I never finished. Yes, it was rough to take on thousands of dollars of debt for a degree that I didn't finish. But I also think that I am so glad that I made the decision to move on from that job. And yes, it had a financial cost, but like it has worked out in the long term. I've since paid off that debt. Now I have a bunch of medical debt. So I think that my financial picture, Drew, looks a little bit less like the way it's supposed to look, quote unquote, maybe than yours does. But I think that it's a work in progress. Like I'm always learning. I'm trying to educate myself on these things and, be a more responsible spender and also be a more responsible saver and be able to save up for some big goals. So I guess I really wanted to like share this story because I think that it is so important to say, like, if you're watching this or listening to this and you're like, my finances are not what they're supposed to be. Well, mine are not either. Like you're not alone in that. And there's room for all of us to grow, of course, but you can't spend every day like shaming yourself for that. And I think there's been times in my life when I felt really insecure about my financial situation and like embarrassed to be transparent about that, like I remember when Drew and I first started dating, I was like, trying to avoid paying for anything. I was like so unbelievably broke. And Drew, after a few dates, was like, so, I've been paying for a lot of stuff. Like, I kind of wanted to talk to you about that. And I was just so embarrassed to say anything. Like, I felt like that reflected poorly on me as a person. But as I've grown up and as, I've learned more about the financial landscape and also how many other people have had these same struggles. I don't think that at all. Like, I don't think that your financial situation reflects on who you are as a person. I think it reflects on our society not having enough education and not having a lot of like, support networks in place, especially when you're just starting out. I think it can be really hard.
First of all, I just want to thank you for sharing that story because I feel like it's really important to show that there are so many different ways that people have to navigate their finances. And it's also important to recognize that your financial situation can be one way for a long time and then change on a dime.
Absolutely.
So one thing that you said that really resonated with me, which is that like my financial journey doesn't look like as much like it should, like yours does, Drew. But the should word is the one where I have this like flashing light going off where I'm like,
you're so right.
What does that even mean? What does it mean? What should your financial situation look like? There's no universal answer.
No, there is not. And I think that there is like a societally kind of prescribed version though. And I think it kind of looks somewhat similar, Drew, to like your financial journey, which is, got out of college, got a job, saved, bought a house, got married, started a family. Like I think there's kind of this.
But not everyone, so I'll be like transparent in this. Not everyone would be able to replicate the circumstances of what I did if you tried.
Exactly.
So for example, like as I said, I moved back into my parents' house after I graduated. If you
Which
don't
helped you save money.
If first of all, if your parents aren't alive, if you don't have a relationship with your parents, XYZ, that's not an option for you.
Totally, yeah.
So now you're like, rent is something that I have to pay to have a place to stay.
Yeah.
That money that you would have otherwise been able to save is now being devoted to something else because you don't have the access to that option. So
I also just think it's unrealistic. I think that, like you said, Drew, if you are not living with your parents and you do have to pay rent and living expenses, I think it is very unrealistic to like be able to save
at that volume.
At that volume that quickly.
Yes.
Because I think we bought our house when you were 30, maybe.
Yes. I think 31. I was 30. Yeah.
But like I'm 27 now, and in 3 years there is no chance that I will have enough money to put a down payment on a house. Like I just won't.
Yeah.
If I saved every penny of my salary, I barely would.
Yeah.
And I can't save every penny of my salary because we have living expenses and also there's stuff I like to do.
Yes.
So I also think that there's this big pressure to save as much as you can, but I also think you have to balance that with living life. I that's just my opinion, but I think that there are some people who like maybe Dave Ramsey who would say like, well, and also just a societal narrative that like millennials are like stupid with money, right? Like
Starbucks and avocado toast.
Exactly. Starbucks and avocado toast. It's destroying us. But I think that if you are only saving and not living, that sounds awful. Like that really sounds awful. And I get that, I've been there, like living to paycheck. You can't be, spending on Starbucks and avocado toast. And I wasn't at that time. But I think that's different. But I think if you are feeling this extreme pressure to save like every penny and it's holding you back from doing the things that are also important to you, like you earn money to live life, not to like have a giant savings account. At least that's for me. Like that's kind of how I think about it, right? Like I want to save enough money to feel comfortable and safe and feel like I have a fallback plan if something goes really wrong. Or as like a person who is chronically ill, like I need to have a safety net because I could be hit with medical bills for my kidney condition at any time. So I need that to feel safe, right? And to not feel that like mental health kind of pressure.
Well, you talk about this a lot where not just for personal finance, but life in general is so centralized around your personal values.
Yeah. I think this is my tagline.
Yeah. So in the instance where we're talking about finances, you are making the decision that saving for a future peace of mind is where you want to prioritize, not for everything, but that's one of the things that you're devoting as a goal. You're also saying, I want to live a life that's like fulfilling and exciting, and I want to be able to like take part in some of life's like little joys, the day-to-day joys. So that's also important to you. I think you have to recognize on paper, and we're going to get to this in a second, but when you go through the budgeting exercises that, you know, you might choose to do or not do, to identify what is it important to me, short term and long term, and how do I make sure that I'm not like handicapping 20 years of the present for 20 years in the future me, because I still need to live those 20 years.
Right.
And also 20 years from now, me is not guaranteed. No. You never know what's going to happen.
Yes. And I'm not saying like spend your money like you're going to die tomorrow.
Right.
Like I don't think that. I think Drew and I have both been kind of like reading a lot about finances and kind of about like our financial education, and you guys know what's coming. Have been loving this book, Financial Feminist by Tori Dunlap, and one of the things, Drew, that she said that kind of really is in line with what you just said is that when you're saving, you can almost think of it like writing a check to your future self. You know, like you're giving your future self a little gift.
Yeah.
And I know that it's just semantics and it's just words. Maybe it sounds silly, but that mindset honestly really helps me, because when I put money into my, you know, high yield savings account, like my long-term account, I can be like, all right, future Quinn, like, where's this going to take you? Yeah. What airplane ticket you going to buy? What are you going to invest in for your family? Right? Like, I think those are really important. And I do love to say and to talk about living into my values. And I honestly, oh my gosh, just like 3 times on this podcast, I've been like, here's the secret to adulting. But it's not a secret. This is just my thought about what makes sense. I think it all comes down to identifying and then living into your values. When you know what is important to you, you can choose in line with those values how to spend or save your money, right? So like something that is really important to me, is one of my core values, is curiosity. And part of that is about like having new experiences, exploring new places. So travel, right, is important to me and is important to us as a couple as well. That's at, you know, the forefront of a lot of our financial conversations. So for example, I have a few different financial goals right now. I want to save and I want to build up an emergency fund, but I am not willing to do that at the expense of living my life and experiencing new things. So I'm finding a balance, right? And it's not perfect. It's not perfect. It's, if I didn't travel, it would take me a lot less time to save that emergency fund. But I think for me, it's so important to keep on living and live into those values and not just put them on hold because of a financial goal that is like overly kind of concrete and prescriptive.
Or conservative.
Yes. Yeah. Conservative, I think, is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk a little bit about, budgeting and just like as a couple. Yeah. We can maybe talk about this a little bit. Yeah. Like, you know, tomorrow is our anniversary actually.
Yeah. Well, when this podcast comes out, I think our anniversary
will have already
yesterday.
passed.
Yeah.
Yes. But our first year anniversary.
Yeah. Married for a year. Our marriage is turning 1.
Our paper anniversary. So fitting for money.
Oh my gosh. I forgot about that.
Yeah. So with that in mind, you know, I think finances as a couple look different for everyone.
Totally.
Both of us work.
Yep.
That's probably the first thing to just kind of share. With that in mind, what has the budgeting process looked like from your perspective as a couple in our marriage?
We've kind of tried a few different like ways to approach this. I think it's also worth saying that we keep our accounts separate. I think that that's like a personal choice, and I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to this. But Drew and I have our, savings and checking and everything separate. We've kind of tried like setting specific, saving or spending goals together and individually. I think we haven't always been the best at like sticking to those goals, if I'm being honest. What do you think?
No, I agree with that. I think it's still a work in progress.
Totally.
Like as with anything, with like the more time we spend together, I think we figure out the nuance around what works for us specifically.
Yeah.
But we've experimented with like ratios of contributions to shared expenses.
Yes.
We've experimented with like fixed numbers of things that maybe like worked at one point but then didn't work again. I think it's important, like, rather than give up, like, first of all, we're not qualified to give a budget advice.
No.
But like I think rather than even go down that line of thought, I think it's important when you're talking to your partner and having these conversations, like realizing that what works in one moment, 6 months from that point might not be the same solution. And we've, like, I would say even in the last year, had that conversation 2 or 3 times where we're like, is this still the right setup for us? Are we like, how do we both feel about this? Do we feel comfortable? Is there something else that like I need from you or you need from me? How transparent are we being with each other? They're all like really important conversations.
Absolutely. And I think that, I don't know, I think that a core part of talking about finances as a couple also comes down to like, this is so obvious and it should be true in any area of your marriage, but like remembering that the other person is a person too, with their own experiences and upbringing that has dictated how they feel about money, right?
Yeah.
So I'll kind of use myself as an example, right? I think for years in our relationship, I would kind of clam up and try kind of put up this like wall when Drew would want to have financial conversations because I felt insecure about my financial picture. I felt like I was going to be judged for that. And not because I even really thought Drew would judge me, but because I've lived life with this societal pressure saying what my finances should quote unquote look like, and they didn't look like that. So I think for a long time, I would really try to push those conversations down the road or, distraction tactic, like, and felt really nervous about having those conversations. But ultimately, of course, it is so much more important to be honest and open with each other. And as we work towards shared goals, I think it's crucial for us to be open and honest.
That last part I think is really important too. Like one of, I think, the most common sources of disagreement in marriages or relationships in general is finances often.
This is a fact.
Yes.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, like we talk about this all the time, we're on the same team with each other. That applies to everything, but with goal setting too. We have personal goals that we're trying to accomplish, but one of the whole points of doing this and being in a relationship and a marriage is trying to work toward like a common goal together.
Yeah.
And to achieve those goals, it requires transparency in these financial conversations, because if you're withholding information or you're feeling ashamed or scared and don't want to open up, it's only going to prohibit you or inhibit you from being able to reach the goal, or it would slow you down in the process.
For sure. And if there's any other people out there who are feeling like nervous about talking to their partner about this kind of stuff, I mean, well, I'm just very lucky to have a great partner, but every time I have ever opened up to you, Drew, about financial stuff, about finances, it has only yielded like good things for our relationship, because it allows us to work better as a team when we both understand the whole picture, right? Like, for example, like I have credit card debt, and Drew, knowing that, right, is like, okay, well, maybe we should adjust, how we're paying for other things so that you can take care of this high interest debt first. Like, you want to work as a team and support each other, because ultimately that's going to lead to the most success for your team, for your marriage, and you and your partner. And also, I love you.
Oh, I love you too. That's great. Well, we're going to switch into rapid fire. If you're familiar, two questions, don't think, just answer.
We're actually going to ask each other the same two questions this week, but Drew, I'll let you ask me first.
Okay. All right. Question 1. What would you consider your biggest money mistake?
I took on debt with the condition that if I stayed in my job for 5 years, that debt would be covered. But I'd never had that job before, and it turned out that I hated it. So I didn't want to stay in it for 5 years. I didn't. I had a bunch of debt. It was a mistake. Ultimately, we move on and we keep on living.
Yes. Question 2, what is a financial goal that you're focused on right now?
My biggest financial goal right now is building my emergency fund. I did some like calculations about my living expenses, and I ended up kind of coming to the conclusion that about like $6,500 is what I would need to get by if I lost my job. Or I mean, I work for myself, but if something happened to my clients,
You couldn't work.
and I couldn't work or whatever, like that's what I would need to get by. So that's kind of what I want to have in my emergency fund. And I'm working towards saving that in a high yield savings account.
I like that. Proud of you.
Thanks, baby. Okay, your turn. Rapid fire. What would you consider your biggest money mistake?
I think not investing earlier was my biggest mistake. And unfortunately, it's one of those things where like I knew when it was happening that I was making the mistake, and I like the train was like gonna collide. Like there was gonna be a train wreck, and I just watched it happen.
Yeah.
And not that it was a train wreck necessarily, but I go back to like the fear conversation and just being overly conservative when I didn't necessarily have to. That would probably be my biggest mistake.
Can I just say something about mistakes before I ask you the next question? I think that when we talk about mistakes, it's like you can recognize that you didn't make the best call, but dwelling on that and letting it continue to bring you down. And I'm not saying you're doing this. I'm just saying in general, like dwelling on it and allowing it to bring you down and make you feel less confident that doesn't help anyone. So I think...
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think you can say like, I made a mistake. I didn't do my best in this situation. I'm going to do better next time. And I'm also going to let it go.
The worst part of this, and I'll be very specific in my example, is like, I feel like every finance book is like, invest in your 20s. Like the longevity of compounding interest is the thing that's going to make you wealthy. They give the Warren Buffett example, and they're like, the last 10 years of his life, he's earned more than he did in like the previous 50 because of compounding interest. So if you miss that 10-year period, you're like, and as someone who like is in my 30s now, I can't go back and undo that.
No.
So now I look at it and I'm like, like what I should have, I know I should have done that. It's a bummer that I didn't do that. But at the same time, waiting even longer because I didn't do it because I'm bummed out doesn't fix anything.
Like here we are now in the present.
And also some progress is better than no progress. Like, no, I might not be able to get the compounding interest that I could have gotten in my 20s, but like I can still get it from here on out. That's the important part. It doesn't make sense to just be like, well, I missed that opportunity, so now I'm not going to do anything.
Right. Now I'm going to throw in the towel. Yeah. I think it's like, here we are. You can't take back anything you've already done. Like you did it already or didn't do it already. So you just have to live from this point forward and say, okay, here I am. Here's the situation. Let me put my best foot forward now.
Yes.
Okay, next question for rapid fire. That was not so rapid. That was slow fire. What is a financial goal you are focused on right now?
I think one of my financial goals is like future things. And I need to be more specific with this, and I'm going to like spend some time working on this. But like, I think for the near term, my like savings goals and like my financial strategy has like worked and is like set up for success. I like have nervousness and like want to prioritize time to think about like, what does our shared retirement look like? What does like our, like if we end up having children, like what does college look like for that? Like
that's something we've talked about is like a big, priority for us, and something that both of our parents were able to kind of gift us was not taking out student loans. And it would be so meaningful, I think, to both of us to be able to do that for our future child or children. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like, it feels insurmountable at times where you're like, this is so much that I need to try and do.
Right.
I think the important part, and you've talked about this before, and I think Tori Dunlap references this in her book, but prioritizing the goals, like you don't have to hit everything equally.
Yes.
Like figure out what's important, like work toward that important goal and then move on to the next one.
Yes. It's kind of like the 8 dimensions of wellness, you might say, right? Like not every goal can be equally prioritized at every time. So do the ones that are most crucial in the moment first.
Yeah.
Like address the thing that's an emergency and then move on to the long-term thing.
Yeah. Well, with that, let's transition into the weekly recap.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay. I'm actually excited.
All right.
So our first dimension, as always, we're going to go through all 8 dimensions and tell you guys what we did in each dimension. But our first one, of course, is the physical dimension. Kick us off, Drew.
The physical dimension, we have continued our like 5 to 10K transition of running training. So that is what we were a little less successful in that this week recap in terms of like how many runs we did, but we still showed up and did at least one or two. I can't remember the exact number.
I think we did 2 is what I wrote down. And we also did our longest run to date in our training.
That's true.
We did 3.5 miles was our like long run.
Was that your physical as well?
It was my physical. My other physical was getting holiday manicure. I fear the camera can't fully see this, but I have a cute little like snowflake. Yeah. Because I think, remember guys, physical is not just about exercising, but seriously, like it's also about,
grooming, presentation. Yeah.
Grooming, presentation. Exactly. Yeah.
What about emotional this week?
My emotional dimension fell a little short this week. This is the first time that I've like not had one for a dimension. And I blame cookies. I blame for those of you who, follow us on Instagram or know us in person, or read my Substack. We did a huge holiday baking project this week. We're going to get to that later, I think, but that completely took over my week and I did not manage to invest in the emotional dimension. But like we always say, I was able to do that because I have been investing in that dimension and setting it up for success to kind of run on autopilot for a week.
Yeah.
What about you?
I also didn't do anything in the emotional dimension this week. It was just kind of a miss. But
yeah.
I think it largely was because of what I did in my social dimension, which was so my creative, I'm going to go out of order here.
Yeah, let's do creative first.
For my creative dimension, I think you have the same one.
I do.
We baked like 300 cookies this weekend.
Insane. So we tried a bunch of new recipes. Honestly, we could link the recipes maybe in the podcast description. So look out for that if you're interested in baking along. But yeah, we did 6 cookies and 7
biscuits.
Yeah, 6 cookies, 1 dog treat, not 7 different kinds of dog treats. That would be crazy.
Yeah, but also because of that, I think this related to the social dimension because we baked the cookies, we packed them up, and then we also were lucky enough to be able to deliver them to people who were local to us. Yeah. And like were invited in many cases and just got to have like great conversations with like friends and neighbors and family. Yeah. It was really nice.
It is my favorite holiday tradition. First of all, I just love baking.
We call it the best day of the year.
Because it is the best day of the year. And we get so excited leading up to it. But it's my favorite thing because I love baking and I love baking with you, Drew. And that's really fun. I also love the creativity of like packaging up our little boxes. Yeah. And we even printed out little like menus kind of this year that
it was Blaze Bakery. We made a logo
with Poppy, a little black lab on it. And I just didn't know if some people would have allergies. So I like wrote out all the ingredients. But yeah, like we made that and it was just this whole cute project. And then, yes, that was my social dimension also was the cookie deliveries. And we chatted with like your aunt, your cousin, our neighbors, your sister, like all kinds of different people, our friends that we were able to deliver these to. And that was so much fun and tiring, but really fun.
Really fun. What about intellectual this week?
You're going to be actually shocked. I did not fully read a book this week.
What?
I know. No, I started a book. I started a book for my book club with a couple of my childhood friends. I started this book called The Book of Alchemy.
Give me your 30-second TikTok review.
No, I can't because I've only read like 20 pages. So my review of the first 20 pages is that it's not exactly what I thought it was going to be. So it's more of something that I think is meant to be a longer term read. Like she kind of prompts, it's about how journaling has impacted her life and the power of journaling for creativity. But I think kind of the idea is that after each little section, like, which is just a few pages, there's a bunch of guest essays. So after each of these essays, you're kind of meant to do a journal prompt in response. Okay. So if I'm going to read this book, I'm kind of like, I might as well do it right and do the journal prompts. That
makes sense.
But I just can't do 100 journal prompts in a week. So I need to like take my time with this one.
Yeah.
But my actual intellectual achievement was that I did the New York Times crossword every day with no like clue reveals.
Wow, that's great.
I know. I'm getting really good at it, guys.
Congratulations.
Thank you. What about you? What did you do for the intellectual
So I started listening to a new audiobook this week called Into Thin Air. Ooh. Which is recounting like a tragedy that happened on an Everest expedition in like the late 90s. Like not an uplifting read, but definitely like harrowing. And like it honestly, my biggest learning with this is that I think it's a book that you have to read rather than listen to.
Oh, okay.
Mainly because there's so many locations that are referenced where I'm like struggling to visualize where things are happening at what
time. Do you
time.
think there's like maps or something in the book?
I don't know for certain, but I have a suspicion that there's like a map, or it might be helpful to just like have a map with you
Yeah.
while you're reading or listening to the book. But it's really interesting. It's not something I would typically pick up, but our friend Lee has like I would say bordering obsession with Everest.
Lee gets a shout out every episode.
She does. Yes.
Because we aspire to be her.
Yes, we highly. But because of this, I was like, this sounds like a really interesting topic. So I've had the chance to peer into this subject matter. It's been fun.
That sounds really cool. Would you recommend the book? I guess you haven't finished it. But...
Yeah, it's hard for me to recommend it at this point. I think if you like adventure-oriented storytelling, it probably is a good one for you.
Yeah. It sounds really interesting from everything you've said.
Yeah.
What about the financial dimension? We did creative already.
Yeah, so the last two dimensions, I actually haven't done anything, which this was like a rough week for me in general in terms of the dimensions of wellness. But as we've said before, I think putting a lot of energy in baking 300 cookies, like really like took our focus in many ways. I also have had like a lot of occupational commitments at work that have been taking up a lot of time.
You've had a super busy few weeks.
Late work nights and like work dinners that I had to go to, and just like,
well, that's kind of in the occupational category.
Yeah. So I mean, I haven't done anything outside of like my expected duties at work, but at the same time, it's been demanding. So
you've been showing up and like doing a great job with it.
It's also, I think, important to mention that like it's challenging when you have those workplace demands to then balance like home demands and like other things too. So it's not always perfect.
No, for sure. I for sure see that.
What about you?
Well, my financial one, I kind of like phoned it in, but I got approved for my high yield savings account. Yeah, I didn't do anything to make that happen. I applied for it last week, but I did get approved, and now I need to do the annoying adulting work of actually being able to fund it, which involves like calling my bank and setting up a transfer. It's just like all this stuff, but one more step in the right direction.
Yep.
I did do the last two dimensions.
Okay.
So for occupational, my occupational thing was saying no to underpriced work. When I first started Right HQ, I would say yes to literally anything. I started Right HQ back in 2022 when I got laid off from my job after teaching. After teaching, I briefly for, I don't know, like half a year worked as a copy editor. I loved it, but unfortunately the like publication that I was working for was struggling. So I got laid off, and I was like, I'm just going to work for myself, which is the most Quinn thing, right? Like major authority problems. But yeah, so I work for myself, and I would say yes to literally anything and everything because I needed money. Now I'm really grateful to be in a place where if someone offers me work that is way below my price point, I can just be like, no, thank you. Here's my minimum rate. And I'm much less willing to negotiate that now because I have a great roster of clients.
That's great
already. So when I do take on work, I feel like I get to work on subjects that I'm interested in at a rate that I think is appropriate.
Very proud of you for that.
Thank you. And my final one was environmental, which is that, as you can imagine, we made like the world's biggest mess when we were making 300 cookies.
Yes, we did.
So my environmental one was that we really did do a great job cleaning up and making our kitchen and our house tidy, our classic Sunday reset to set ourselves up for a good week.
Love it.
Well, that was everything I did this week. How'd you feel about the week?
I think it was like a fun week. It was not my most like well-rounded week.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think it also was fun. So I'm going to take it as a win.
I love that. I kind of feel the same way. Like some of my dimensions were a little iffy, really, like super small.
Yeah.
But I think we did so much in the creative and social dimensions that it kind of like the cup overfloweth in a good way. It like overfloweth and fill up some other cuppeths.
I like that.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, I think that wraps it up. So as always, please feel free to like, subscribe, comment anywhere where you listen to podcasts or watch them, or follow us on social media.
We'll be back next week, which will come to you guys after Christmas. So if we don't speak to you or see you before then, happy holidays, and we'll talk soon.